Hello everyone. OpenAI released a lot of cool features on their Dev Day conference. One of the things that I'm very excited about is the Assistants API, which is in beta right now. Some very interesting features in the Assistants API are, firstly, it provides state management for the back and forth chat conversations that we have with the AI assistant. We no longer have to manage that messages array ourselves. They introduce the concept of thread that takes care of it. Threads also take care of the problem with exceeding the context length when there are too many messages. So that's taken care out of the box. Secondly, there are tools. There are tool support such as code interpreter and retrieval that are supported out of the box, along with function calling, which will allow us to add any custom tools that we want. More tools would be added out of the box in the future as well. So that's exciting. In this video, I'll show you a simple example using Assistants API and use the code interpreter tool. Let's dive in. Now first let's install the dependencies that we need to install. In this environment I've already installed it, so I'm not going to run it. Next, let's import all the necessary packages that we need. And then finally instantiate the OpenAI class and create a client out of it. The key thing is to have the OpenAI API key. In my case, I have the key in an environment file. So I'm loading it using .env and then reading the environment variable and assigning it to the API key. So this should create as the client that we need. Now the next step is to create the assistant. To create the assistant, let's use this code. Here we're calling client.beta.assistants.create and pass in this few parameters: name of the assistant, any name that you can give, instructions. This is going to act similar to the system message that we used in the chat completion API. So I'm calling it your personal math tutor, write and run code to answer math questions. Because it needs to write and run code, we need to provide it a tool to do it. So we would use the out-of-the-box code interpreter tool that they have made available for us. So the tool type is code interpreter, and you can also specify multiple tools for an assistant. Here in this case, code interpreter should do the job for us, so going with it. And then finally specify the model that we are going to use. Here in this case, it's the GPT-4 1106 preview, the model that they introduced a couple of weeks back. So the assistant is all set. The next one is to create a thread. Thread represents a user session, and it is able to hold the state, the messages array, the conversation, the back and forth conversation between the user and the AI assistant. Thread holds all of that. So let's create that. This creates a thread, and then now let's add messages into it. So we need to first create a message. To create a message, again, use this client.beta.threads.messages.create, and then pass in the thread ID. The role, it's an user role, and then the message from the user. So in this case, let's say I need to add all numbers from 1 to 100. Can you help me with that? And also provide the formula to do that. And that's it. So we have created our first message. And now let's take a look at the message itself within the thread. Let's take a look at the same message that we just created. So to do that, we need to retrieve the message from a different endpoint. So let's do that. Client.beta.threads.messages.list. List is the one which would give you all the messages that are associated with that particular thread, and pass in the thread ID. Once you do that, you got it. Now let's Now let's get the first message. There is only one message, or let's print the entire message. So print messages dot. There's a nice handy utility function which basically gives us the JSON. Let's utilize that. So if you see here, this is the message that we created. Here we have the assistant ID as null because it's a user message. You can see the message itself here and the role here. So we've got the message added to the thread. Now the next thing is to pass this message to the assistant and invoke the assistant itself, so the AI can do the job that we asked it to do and then respond with the message. To do that, we need to invoke the assistant. There's something called run, which is basically invoking the assistant and basically invoking it for a particular time. That's your run. If you invoke the assistant for a time, that's called run in the assistant API terms. So to do that, let's say client.beta.threads.runs.create and pass in the thread ID and the assistant ID. This should create a run, and immediately if you see run.status, it would be in queued status. So we need to do polling and retrieve the status of the run. So it would take some time for it to respond. It's asynchronous. As soon as you create the run, it basically goes into queued status, and then once the assistant is doing the work, the status would be in progress, and then after a few seconds, depending on the task that we ask the assistant to do, it would get to the completed status. Only after it gets to the completed status, we would be able to retrieve the assistant's response from the messages. So right now it's polling. They've mentioned that they're going to improve that, and we don't have to do the polling in the future. But right now, since it's in beta, we have to do the polling manually. So if I had written the code sooner, then you would have seen that you would have to try it a few more times for a few more seconds before you get to the completed status. But right now, it's in completed status, and to do that we use retrieve endpoint. Now let's see. Let's display the message, the assistant's response. Similar to earlier, let's get the messages.list endpoint, and get the messages, and the assistant's response is going to be in the index 0 position. As and when a message gets added, it's kept on getting added on the top of the index, not top of the array, not at the end of the array. So let's get the first message. To do that, let's say messages dot data of 0 dot content of 0 dot text dot value. See here, it says the sum of all numbers from 1 to 100 is 5050. That's good. It was able to do what we asked it to do. For some reason it didn't do providing the formula. Yeah, we might have to check on that, but it gave you the answer. Now, one thing that we can do definitely is to improve this manual polling. We can make it, we can create a small function which does that automatically for us and invoke the display of the message or handling the response of the assistant automatically. So here I have got a small utility function written which does that for us. Here it is. So the get assistant response takes in thread ID or run ID and then a callback function which would be called as and when the status turns to completed. And I've specified an interval of 2 seconds here and a max attempt of 60 times. So it would keep on trying at 2 second intervals for 60 times. That's 2 minutes. And then if it goes beyond that, the thing would time out and error out. So basically we are looping it until we reach the max items, and are invoking the retrieve endpoint to get the latest runs status. We get a status here and check for if the status is equal to completed. If it's in progress or some other status, then we basically print out that status. And when it is in completed status, we call the callback function and then break from there. And the callback function is the handle response. It retrieves the status, it gets the status as an input, checks if it's completed, and if it's completed, then it invokes the method that we want to actually do, display the assistant messages. In the display messages function, the code is simple. We do the same thing that we did earlier. We retrieve the messages through the list endpoint on the messages for the thread, and get the latest message, which is going to be the assistant's response. Now let's create a new thread. So here we are creating a new thread and asking it to do a different thing, count, add from 1 to 1000, and let's trigger the assistant. So here we are passing the thread1.id and creating a new run one for the same assistant. Let's do that. And then finally invoke the utility function that we wrote. So yeah, it completed pretty quickly, and it was able to return the response of the assistant. So that's it. So using the callback function, it makes the job easier to poll it programmatically and get to do whatever we want to do as the next step after assistant response with the message. Now finally, let's take a look at the message itself, the entire body of the message. To do that, let's import JSON and let's utilize the model dump JSON utility function the messages provides. And this one, although it provides a JSON, it's in string format. So let's load it and convert it to a dictionary, and then using JSON to dumps, let's convert it back to a string and print it in a pretty manner. So if you see here, there's a data array at the top, and there are two messages. This is the first message, which is the assistant's message, the response from the assistant. And the second message is going to be the message, the user message that we provided at the start. And then you can see various fields. One is the actual content itself. The run ID is nothing here, but this one should have a run ID and a thread ID, those details. So yeah, now that we have converted this into a dictionary, we can print it using that. So let's say message JSON data 0 content 0 and text value. To close the brackets. Yeah, so we're able to get it. So that's all to get started with the Assistants API. This is a simple example. Look out for more videos from me. I'm going to go in depth into various aspects of the Assistants API and the various tools that we could use. So yeah, look forward to it. Thank you. Thanks for watching. And until next time, take care. See you guys soon.